If you stand along the shores of Lake Norman today, it's easy to think the lake has always been here. Water stretching across the Piedmont, boat docks, quiet coves. But beneath this lake is a much older landscape, a river that flowed freely for thousands of years. Villages, farms, roads that once crossed the Catawba River long before the water rose. And somewhere beneath the water are the traces of communities that once stood where the lake now stretches for miles. For thousands of years, the river shaped the people who lived beside it. In the 20th century, people began shaping the river itself. Welcome back to Made in Carolina. If you just listened to the trailer, you already know this season is about the stories beneath the water. But before we get there, we need to take a step back, because Lake Norman didn't just appear on the map one day. It didn't begin with marinas or waterfront homes. To understand Lake Norman, we have to understand a river, the Catawba River, and the people, communities, and industries that transformed that river into a chain of lakes stretching across North and South Carolina. For at least 6,000 years, the Catawba Nation lived along the river that now feeds Lake Norman. They called themselves the people of the river. Long before dams and shorelines and waterfront homes, the Catawba moved through this landscape in ways the lake can't quite show us now. Villages surrounded by wooden palisades, council houses filled with smoke and ceremony, open plazas where communities gathered for meetings, celebrations, and games. Homes where generations lived side by side. Life followed the rhythm of the river. Corn and squash growing in nearby fields, fish pulled from the current, clay shaped into pottery, a tradition the Catawba still carried forward today. Trade routes stretched across the Piedmont. Before colonization, the Catawba were not a small community on the margin. They were a powerful nation whose homelands stretched across much of what we now call North and South Carolina. But connection also brought danger. In the 1700s, smallpox swept through Catawba communities, devastating a population once in the tens of thousands. By the end of the century, fewer than 1,000 remained. And still, they endured, they rebuilt, they stayed. During this time of enormous change, one of the most visible leaders of the Catawba Nation was King Hagler. Hagler worked consistently to protect Catawba land and maintain peace with neighboring settlers. He negotiated treaties, he encouraged cooperation when possible, and he tried to preserve a homeland for his people as colonial settlement pushed deeper into the Carolinas. The Catawba fought alongside the English during the French and Indian War. Later, they supported the Patriot cause during the American Revolution. Their warriors even appear in the journals of George Washington. But alliances did not prevent loss. In 1840, the Treaty of Nation Ford forced the Catawba to relinquish roughly 144,000 acres of land to the state of South Carolina. Promises made in the treaty were never fully honored. Many assumed the Catawba Nation would disappear. They didn't. They held onto their pottery traditions, their language, and their relationship to the river. Federal recognition was stripped in 1951. It took more than 20 years to regain it. Today, the Catawba Nation still lives along the river in South Carolina, even if the river itself now looks very different. By the mid-1700s, European settlers began establishing farms along the Catawba River. Many were Scotch-Irish and German immigrants drawn by fertile land and access to water. Some farms were small. Others became large plantations sustained through enslaved labor. Families like the Burtons, Grahams, Connors, Brevards, and Reeds owned large tracts of land along both sides of the river. Plantations such as Beatty's Ford Plantation became important centers of agriculture and trade. Roads crossed the river at places like Beatty's Ford and Cowan's Ford, connecting communities across Mecklenburg, Lincoln, and Iredell counties. Despite being rural, the area was far from isolated. Tradespeople worked nearby, schools were established, churches were built. Visitors even traveled to the Catawba Springs Hotel, a popular destination for wealthy travelers across the Carolinas. The river connected communities. It carried crops, it carried people, it carried opportunity. During the American Revolution, the Catawba River also became a strategic crossing. On February 1st, 1781, British forces under General Cornwallis crossed the river at Cowan's Ford, near present-day Lake Norman. Nearly 5,000 British troops pushed into the icy current. American militia, significantly lower in their number, waited along the banks. Gunfire echoed across the water. There were casualties on both sides. American General William Davidson was killed in the fighting. The British won that battle, but the war in the Carolinas soon turned against them. Months later, the British surrendered at Yorktown. Life along the river resumed, but the meaning of the river had shifted. It was no longer only a homeland. It had become something valuable, something strategic, something to control. As settlement expanded along the Catawba River in the late 1700s and early 1800s, communities developed along both sides of the water. To the south, farms and intersection communities grew in Mecklenburg County. Further north, the river shaped the development of Iredell County. Towns like Statesville emerged as important centers of trade and government. Families lived on both sides of the river. Churches were built, schools were established, and communities across Mecklenburg, Iredell, and Lincoln counties were closely connected by the same river flowing between them. For generations, the Catawba River was something people crossed, something that tied communities together, a connection that moved freely without interruption. If we could stand along the Catawba River in the early 1900s, before the dams were built, the landscape would look very different. Instead of one large lake, you would see a winding river moving through farmland and wooded hills. Small communities dotted the countryside. Plantations and farms stretched across both sides of the river. Railroad stops like Caldwell Station connected rural communities to Charlotte and Davidson. Towns like Cornelius and Mooresville were growing along the rail lines. Families crossed the river to attend church, visit neighbors, and trade goods. The river was not a barrier. It was a thread tying communities together. But that was about to change. By the early 20th century, the Carolinas were undergoing rapid change. Textile mills were expanding, cities were growing, and the demand for electricity was rising. Engineers began looking at rivers like the Catawba not just as waterways, but as sources of power. At the center of that vision was a company then known as Southern Power, backed by industrialist James Duke and shaped by engineers like William States Lee. But even before the system fully took shape, others had already begun to imagine what the river could become. Figures like the surgeon and industrialist Dr. Walker Gill Wiley from South Carolina helped lay the groundwork. Wiley saw the potential of the Catawba River early and helped draw attention and investment to hydroelectric power in the region. Out of these early efforts, a larger system began to emerge. Instead of building a single dam, engineers imagined something bigger, a chain of hydroelectric lakes stretching across the Catawba River, linking North and South Carolina through a shared system of power. By the time Lake Norman was built, that vision had already been decades in the making. But this wasn't just about engineering, because long before it powered cities, the Catawba River sustained lives. It was, and still is, home to the Catawba Nation. And every dam changed that river, and every lake changed the land around it. Communities that had been rooted there for generations found themselves in the path of rising water. Homes, farms, churches, entire ways of life would be moved or left behind. Still, the system kept growing. Electricity generated along the Catawba River didn't stay in one place. It moved across county lines, across state lines, powering textile mills in the Piedmont, lighting cities like Charlotte, and fueling industry across both Carolinas. That same river that once connected communities by water was now connecting them through electricity. And Lake Norman wasn't the beginning of that story. It was part of a larger network, one that included Lake Wiley, the oldest lake in the Catawba River system, first created in 1904, and later renamed to honor Wiley's role in shaping this vision. And while the Catawba was being transformed here, similar changes were happening further south, where entire communities would also be flooded on an even larger scale. By the mid-20th century, the Carolinas were no longer just connected by shared history or geography. They were connected by power. And in the next episode, we'll step closer to that transformation, not from the perspective of the companies that built the lakes, but from the people who lived on the land before the water came. Today, Lake Norman stretches across Mecklenburg, Iredell, Lincoln, and Catawba counties, more than 30,000 acres of water. A destination for boating, fishing, and lakefront living. But beneath the surface lies a much older landscape, a river that shaped the lives of the Catawba Nation, a landscape of farms, plantations, railroads, and crossroads communities, and a moment in the 20th century when engineers reshaped the river itself. For thousands of years, the river shaped the people who lived beside it. Then people reshaped the river. And the result was Lake Norman. In the next episode, we'll step into the earlier landscape, before the dams, before the rising water, and into the lives of the families and communities who called this place home. Because every lake has a story, and sometimes those stories are hidden just beneath the surface.
radiation from so much screen time.